Chapter 6. Ryan Owens killed. Sally Yates fired for non-compliance. Executive Order 13672. War is one of the reasons I can't take politics seriously. Politics is often a power struggle because some of the world leaders are psychotic, but they've somehow achieved their position of power. I like that the US government is allied with South Korea against the North, as the North is obviously a real problem. The problem is, now both countries have to waste their time, resources, and whatever amount of money, just because somebody is out of control and abusing his power. The New York Times mentions that Park Geun-hye was impeached for corruption and power abuse. Why don't the people of North Korea do the same for Kim Jong-un? The North Koreans are either cowards or they approve of Kim's tyranny, which makes them as bad as he is. If they do approve of Kim's ways, North Korea is South Korea's ISIS. On the note of war, being humanity at its worst and darkest, which is common in the world, a premature and ill-conceived mission was greenlighted, a mission that immediately costed Navy SEALs Ryan Owens' life, along with many civilians, all on account of Donald's irresponsibility. Clicking on an embedded video on NBCNews.com's article, a soldier, whose name was not provided, clarified that every effort was taken to prevent loss of life. That's the problem, though. War negatively affects more than the troops. War causes immense destruction and psychologically affects communities who personally experience that destruction. In this case, however, this soldier's words are shit because the mission should not have happened. Donald attempted to excuse himself, saying this mission was going on before he got into office, and it was something his generals wanted to do. How is the desire to do something a sufficient reason to proceed with a military raid? Donald then said he believes his generals are the most respected in many decades. 1. How is Donald's belief relevant? 2. So, the generals whom Donald believes are the most respected in decades screw up this badly? 3. Are they still respected? Donald's tone also indicates a lack of emotion and apathy. I applaud Bill for being honest and critical about Donald. This was a political disgrace. Executive Order 13769, entitled Protecting the Nation from Foreign Terrorist Entry into the United States, was revisited by the Supreme Court, which means this order is a little excessive. Excessive to the point that some major parts of it are contradictory to the American Constitution, and those parts needed to be restrained. To play the devil's advocate, this order may be unconstitutional in some major parts, but Donald is acting on an extreme case here. ISIS has become the worst form of religious extremism that the world has ever seen, and it's not like the non-violent Muslims are even trying to do anything about the radical ones. I'll clarify that I don't agree with this ban. I simply understand on that level. I personally dislike that this order has caused problems for many who have nothing to do with any terrorism. In Donald's defense, however, at least he's making an effort, unlike the past presidents. Remembering my researching of ISIS, ForeignPolicy.com's article said the U.S. shared Israel's view about denying responsibility of the Palestinians. This irresponsibility angered Osama bin Laden and the other Sunni Muslims, which is why this terrorism is a problem. Yes, Islam also hates the modern world, but this neglect was the main cause, apparently. I first read about Donald firing Sally Yates back when Michael Flynn was in hot water for lying to the FBI. I remember criticizing Donald for being quick to fire this woman, while not even questioning Michael, because her firing was mentioned in an article about Michael. Reading further into this, as it's recorded in Donald's presidential timeline, my opinion that Donald was unfair and unprofessional remains. Alicia has mentioned to me many times that Donald wants to either undo everything Barack has done, or either change or abolish whatever because Donald isn't responsible for it. This article brings that opinion a step toward truth. as the White House officials pointed Sally's position and appointee in Obama's administration out like they're elementary school students making fun of her for it. Also calling her weak instead of having a meeting with her or even just discussing the matter on the phone. She was verbally mobbed and then fired. A government official was treated this way. By the government. They didn't even have the guts to tell her in person. The message was delivered in the mail. If Donald was a mafia boss, he would have had Sally whacked, judging by his behavior toward her non-compliance. Sean Spicer accused her of not doing her job when she was simply acting on professional skepticism toward the executive order. I can appreciate Sally not just resigning, but that would have been the wise decision. Executive Order 13672. This order is very long and difficult to understand. It has mostly to do with contracts and labor laws, so there's nothing to comment on. What I will say is, the problem isn't even with this executive order if it does contain some unfair or illogical parts. The problem is that society is just that mentally unstable. An executive order is required to keep people in line. Think about that. What's going on is, this is from Barack, which is entitled Fair Play and Safe Workplaces. This order is an amendment to Richard Nixon's order. Barack then created a set of amendments for both this executive order along with 11246. I don't know how this order will deal with workplace discrimination. As I mentioned in my preface, however, I think establishing an agency to hire an agent to talk with an employer whom somebody suspects is discriminating against is the best way to deal with it. Protocol could be made for the agents to follow in order to find out if the employer is indeed guilty of committing discrimination. Protocol consisting of questions to ask the employer to find out why the person looking to be hired was denied employment. If the client really is unfit or doesn't qualify for the job, discrimination is obviously not the case. It is my opinion that employers should be obligated to provide reasons or an explanation of why the job seeker was denied upon request. If the reasons for rejecting the job seeker are legitimate, the person can get help. Some people need to know, so they can learn from their mistakes. They also have a right to know. One of my criticisms of government is they don't dig into problems to find out why people commit such criminal behaviors. Arresting people and throwing them in jail isn't going to correct anybody's mentality. Governments also waste taxes and resources on anti-economic laws. Religion. This Wikipedia article talks a lot about religious people wanting to reject LGBT people. These religious people really need to just live off the land. They're obviously in the religion because it supports their prejudices. They would otherwise not be religious, or they would live by their belief that God will judge these people and just go about their business. They aren't obligated to socialize with their employees, only to be professional. The reality is, to be an abomination in the eyes of God and employed by a religious person you know does not approve of you, is to be vulnerable to mistreatment by that employer. No government order will stop the religious mentality. Telling them to leave America if they don't like not being allowed to discriminate is my only thought on this aggravating nonsense. America is about freedom of religion, not discrimination. I'll even say that I think other religious people who understand this is wrong and are disgusted by this should be vocal against this unconstitutional attitude and behavior. These religious people are not good people if they actually act on their views. They are mentally ill. This is religious extremism, and such people are to be avoided. Their desire to discriminate against other people because of their beliefs make these religious people equally as bad as what they believe is bad about the minorities. Christianity likes to call itself a pure and true source of morality. So, how is discrimination moral? If God is the one who makes the rules and calls for the judgment, How is God moral? Also, I really think the government should be doing something about these religious people, because they're actually defying the Constitution by requesting the right to discriminate. I'll also add that these people obviously aren't even religious, because they want to discriminate. It's all about them. Again, they would otherwise leave everything up to God, as Christianity says God is judge. They obviously side with this God and have sold their own kind out. The reactions. The Roman Catholic officials claim the government doesn't understand sexuality, which these officials believe the government to be excluding them on account of their religious beliefs. What does human sexuality have to do with contracting? This joint statement makes no sense. They also argued about restroom usage, which is a straw man because such people really do feel uncomfortable as their biological gender. They aren't making that up just to look at the opposite gender. Many of these people go through surgery. That would be an extremity to the point of ruining their life, just to look at the opposite sex. Peter Scrigg criticized this order as politically correct coercion, under the claim that homosexuality is immoral behavior. Are gays and lesbians having sex on the job? Peter didn't specify the immorality he accuses homosexuality of. I would comment on his claim that this order causes employer vulnerability, but he actually believes homosexuality is harmful in some way. He just didn't explain anything. Tony Perkins is angry that homosexuals, transgenders, and cross-dressers are all given special treatment, when the order is simply protecting them from people like him who side with a God who hates all such acts for no good reasons, and actually calls for death upon them. People like him who also believe they deserve the right to discriminate against them, when it's them who don't belong in America. The only concern any superior or owner should ever have is how the employees function on the job. Robert Jeffress is concerned about the tax-exempt status of churches. He thinks this order will bring about the revocation of tax exemption in the future. If the churches are legitimately helping the needy, that shouldn't be a concern. This is actually hypocrisy. These religious types are worried about the needy people, yet they want to discriminate against people, deprive them of employment. The transparency here is obvious. Todd Starnes said militant LGBT agenda, while the religious are the ones who want to be on the offense with their desire to discriminate. They don't even provide reasons why gays and other such people are bad or immoral. Christianity likes to claim persecution a lot, yet here they are persecuting these minorities. Anyway, Donald is going to continue enforcing this executive order, which is good. Chapter 6 note. Regarding the religious objection to homosexuals, transgenders, cross-dressers, or whomever else who is different, if people have excessive body modifications, maybe they have a psychological disorder. Those people need to be questioned. Chapter 18. Donald has a meeting with 24 manufacturing CEOs. The administration plans to increase CSA enforcement. CPAC 2017. What was so magical about Donald's election that caused these companies to suddenly invest their millions into creating these jobs? These companies should have come forward and made the government deal with those problems, if there were any, instead of waiting around for the right person to get elected into office. So many Americans talk about how much they love America and how great America is. Yet, these companies build plants outside the country, instead of coming forward to demand the government make the necessary changes and pass whatever regulations to make their millions worth the investment for job creation. I have to say, even if Donald is to credit for these jobs, the companies are irresponsible. So what, these companies will only invest in job creation when the true prince inherits the throne? Americans are praising Donald, when they should be calling these companies out. That's the problem here. Praising God is the exact same nonsense. God is omnipotent, but also receives praise and worship for answering prayers to solve their problems, which should never happen to begin with, given that God is omnipotent. If omnipotence can't create immortal beings that don't have to take care of health, what can? What will happen when Donald is out of office? Are these companies going to resort back to taking their business out of the country again, if and when the economy goes sour again? Donald actually expects to have a good relationship with Mexico, after he's both insulted the country and also threatened to build a wall along their shared border, which he intends to make Mexico pay for. How can Donald expect to have a relationship after all of that? Worse yet, Donald talks about not being able to find a country where America does well, and America being at loss with everybody. So, America never does any wrong? The fact that the term recreational is combined with marijuana is the key thing here. Lots of people obviously want the stuff, so to keep politically fighting against it is unconstitutional. My only problem with it is that it travels in the air. There are solutions to problems, though. The spine of Donald's presidency is job creation. Yet he only recognizes medical marijuana when there is a national demand for marijuana for both medicine and recreation. Passing legislation isn't going to stop the desire for marijuana. If it's dangerous, start questioning Americans about why they want the stuff. Capitalism is about profit, based on what people want and how many people want it. It doesn't care what's unhealthy or dangerous. Sean Spicer talks about not encouraging people during the opioid addiction crisis, when these politicians and government officials either can't understand that legislation isn't the solution, or they push for imprisonment for capital gain, knowing legislation only perpetuates drug use. Sean said the Department of Justice is looking into recreational use. What's to look into? People want to smoke weed, which makes it an economic demand. Passing legislation against weed is anti-economic. Imprisonment takes people away from their family, which is wrong. While medical marijuana is protected by an amendment, why does recreational use remain a Schedule I controlled substance? The planet produces it, which makes it natural, and people are simply responsible to learn about it before smoking it. It should be that simple. Under the Conflicting Reactions section of the MJBizDaily.com page, Bob Karp says Sean Spicer's comments aren't a big deal, but Sean denounces Bob, saying that he doesn't make decisions for the Justice Department or Donald. The question is, why do either this department or Donald make the decision for marijuana, when both the country's constitution and the economy already do? Not a very good argument from Sean. Not to me, anyway. In addition to that, however, I'll say that all who are against marijuana are also both anti-constitutional and economic. You're all un-American. I was unaware of private prisons until about 5 years ago. Private prisons are a commercialization of such institutions, which is improper because nobody should be making profit off of convicted criminals serving a sentence. Correctional facilities are institutions, not businesses. I agree with the opposition arguments. Prisons should be run by the government, by which is responsible for the laws, nobody else. If the prison is inadequate somehow, that needs to be corrected by the system. There are many people, usually right-wingers, who argue the straw man of luxury vacations to prisons when others talk about prisons being safe for the prisoners. The Amazing Atheist has uploaded a video recently about Fiona Apple's video talking about inmates being safe from COVID. Commenters were arguing that prisons shouldn't be resorts or vacations, while nobody was saying prisons should be a pleasant place on any level, only safe. Yes, prisons should be safe. Convicts are there to serve time, not to be put into a dangerous environment where they might not survive their sentence. To argue that prisons should be a dangerous environment is a criminal mentality. Saving money is clearly just an excuse. If crime is a problem, maybe a better system is needed. Or maybe some of the laws are stupid, and those laws need to be stopped. Maybe even less money should be spent on other things. The world throws money at things instead of solving problems, which is why crazy ideas like private prisons exist. Betsy DeVos used the inadequacy of public schools to push for private schools, when ironically, she could improve public education, now being in the presidential cabinet. My associate Alicia mentioned that private prisons are being used for cheap labor, which is not why the convicted criminals are there. They are there to be punished, not to benefit anybody. There is what Huffington Post refers to as a damning report that explains in details why for-profit prisons are dangerous. I don't think Jeff Sessions or the other Republicans care about what information Sally Yates or any media outlet has to bring to the table about these prisons. The Republicans only care about their precious profit. Jeff has decided to reverse Barack's policy to help with Donald's sudden smackdown of the immigration law, which is insanity because the smackdown is the actual problem. Damon Hanninger tried to provide additional support to this, saying these private prisons are more safe and humane. The better idea would be these companies providing funding for the government prisons if they are insufficient. There are a few more voices of reason, aside Sally Yates though. David C. Fathai and Bernie Sanders have made a statement that they also both see through the transparency of the corruption being tempted by the Trump administration. CPAC 2017. After complaining about the dishonest media once again, Donald criticizes people for calling strong borders and military controversial. Does he ever question those people about their attitude toward their negative opinions? Donald also pointed out that his audience at this convention didn't see the controversy in either a strong border or military. He just appealed to his own popularity. I've already clarified that my opinion is that the government should be investigating and intervening to solve the immigration problem. I've also pointed out that people are irresponsible to wait for the right president to come forward, which is exactly what Donald just credited himself to be. So, aside from these patriots, as Donald appraises them, waiting for the right president, he really isn't because he's taking the wrong approach to immigration. As for the military, is America really under attack so much that its military needs to be strengthened? Aside from ISIS, of course. Donald starts carrying on about winning again, and appraising his supporters for getting him elected, while also attempting to disgrace the media because they doubted Donald's election. Very immature. He continues, bringing the pundits into it, rubbing their nose into his victory. Then adds insult to injury, saying they suck up all that money. I don't think you're one to criticize anybody about sucking money up, Donnie. A real low blow thrown at the pundits at nearly 5 minutes into the speech. They're not good at politics, but they're really good at sucking up people's money. What political good have you done, Mr. Trump? Donald commented, "We've been allowing our infrastructure to fall into total disrepair and decay." After a 5-minute obsessive rant about so-called fake news. Why did people neglect the infrastructure? Why couldn't American citizens demand that careless politicians either do something or get them out? Donald's rant was about the polls, which is silly, but then about the media both lying about Donald and fabricating sources, which he should be doing something about, instead of whining about it in his speeches. If the media is guilty of these offenses, his supporters are spitting in Donald's face by tuning in on their TV and clicking on their internet content because they're giving them ratings. Other people obviously read, listen, and watch, but that's why Donald needs to hold them legally responsible if they are lying about him and fabricating sources. I agree that Donald's opposition is wrong to support the dishonesty. I got tired of hearing the anti-Trump shit a few years ago, and I don't feel like researching every story. Because the media wants to fuck around by being shallow, catering to people's appeal of hearing what they want, instead of having integrity and providing actual information. There it is again, the "I inherited a mess" card. America is a mess because the people are careless, uninformed, willfully ignorant, lazy, and divided. They prefer to just blame, hate, and fight. Very few Americans have their priorities straight, while most other Americans push their nonsense opinions and beliefs onto others. These people don't know what the hell is going on, or what to do about anything. War is a part of American culture. Do these patriots ever research the wars that America has fought? Did they know who started each war, and what that war was about? I just did a Google search for a list of wars America has been involved in. There are 11 major wars that America fought in. The understanding of what the Confederacy was all about is scattered. That's how informed people are. What does "a little warm heart" mean? And was Donald referring to the media when he said, "the people you're watching"? What does losing the election have to do with Obamacare? How many elections are necessary for what? Donald claims he's going to make healthcare better, but gives no explanation how he intends to. Socialized healthcare is out of the question. After carrying on about Obamacare, Donald started talking about the $20 trillion debt and a disaster-marked foreign policy. Then jumps to not winning anything. America isn't winning what? What is Donald's obsession with winning? The audience again chants, "USA, USA, USA." They obviously don't know what Donald is talking about. Repeating his patriotic statement, "American steel only," Donald tells the story again about how he told a company representative that he demands American steel, then complains about the protesters. So, those protesters didn't have a point? They were nothing more than an obstruction to job creation? Donald proceeds to pat himself on the back for lifting restrictions on mining, which Barack placed to protect the water supply. Sorry, Donald, but coal is not clean. Donald really likes to rail on Barack Obama. It's fucking pathetic. I think what's really going on here is Donald is using the mining industry as an excuse to undo Barack's rule, while he also wants to bring the mining industry back because that's what Barack never managed to do. Donald also took a shot at the consultants for the Keystone Pipeline, whom Barack was dealing with. While Donald says that he wants regulations, there was nothing wrong with Barack's stream protection rule. I've also observed the audience cheering when Donald whitewashed his congressional undoing of this rule, which was about waste dumping and not climate change. This means either the audience is ignorant and intellectually lazy, or they don't care. As for these car companies coming back to America to invest for the sake of job creation, maybe that's another part of the problem. Nobody is opening mom and pop shops. Only corporations are coming back to invest their riches. Chapter 18 note. Both the transcription and the YouTube video of Donald's meeting with the 25 manufacturing CEOs ended at the same time, which was only 15 minutes, entirely too short for a meeting. I commented on what information was available. Chapter 5. Donald's Dinner with James Comey. Executive Order 13770. Steve Bannon. The NewYorkTimes.com says the White House denied Donald asking James Comey to pledge his loyalty. I'll say this. James should have started recording the conversation at this dinner after Donald first asked. Being the head of the FBI, James could have excused himself and then contacted another FBI agent to begin recording the dinner's conversation. Yes, that is movie-level stuff, but James has made the claim that Donald has asked him to pledge his loyalty to Donald. The White House denied it, and nobody else can ever know what really happened. Americans have a right to know what's going on, and if somebody is lying. What I will do here is continue with this anyway, to give my unbiased perspective. That's what this book is about, after all. James Comey believed his reluctance to pledge his loyalty to Donald was the end of his position as the FBI head. Was Donald supposed to ask for this pledge? Was James supposed to? The New York Times mentions that the FBI is traditionally supposed to be lawfully separate from politics. I tried doing a Google search to confirm this, but found no sites saying anything about the pledging of loyalty to the US president. If Donald wasn't, I agree with James that this was both creepy and egotistical of Donald to apply such pressure onto James. This article says James acknowledged that Donald may not realize the FBI isn't supposed to pledge loyalty, but shouldn't he have simply explained that to Donald instead of being awkward at this dinner? If government officials are supposed to make pledges, shouldn't pledges be made at a ceremony, filmed live for television? Also, Donald values his loyalty, but the White House isn't a business. To apply pressure on anybody, especially as the US president, to a government official is ridiculous. Donald is treating his presidency like he's a mafia boss. I don't know anything about mafia. I've only seen the ceremony of people becoming connected on The Sopranos, which was called a blood oath. Donald asked James to pledge his loyalty at a dinner in the White House. Again, if this really happened, Donald is very creepy. Sarah Huckabee Sanders chimes in, to give nothing more than a platitude, naively telling people that Donald cares so much about the leadership of law enforcement agencies. Just empty words. Donald's side. Donald claimed that James requested it. James requested what? If Donald was referring to this private dinner, shouldn't Donald have declined? Never mind this whole who said what nonsense. Nothing would be in question if Donald just declined his request, as he should have. The remaining information in this article mentions evidence of the intervention. What intervention? The previous paragraph only mentions the FBI investigation of the Russian meddling in Donald's election. Nobody even knows who requested this private dinner. James said Donald did, obviously to ask James to pledge his loyalty. Donald said James did because James was worried about losing his job. No recordings were made, so nobody will ever know who was telling the truth, if anybody. I've also been told that James is a liar. If that's true, why has he ever been in the FBI? Again, if Donald had simply declined this dinner request and asked James why he wanted it, all of this could have been avoided. George Papadopoulos made a few mistakes. One, he didn't get proof of identity from this professor, or do a background check on this person. 2, he treated Hillary's emails as dirt on her, instead of simply taking the responsibility of forwarding them to whomever. This professor taking an interest in George on his new job, not creeping George out, is peculiar. Having met this professor in Italy, and then introduced to a Russian woman, makes this whole ordeal sound like a James Bond movie. I would have told the FBI about this mysterious professor before going to meet him. I'm not into politics, and I know not to act on anything without consulting anybody or doing a background check first. Paul Manafort is also mentioned in this, and he's guilty of many crimes. Didn't Donald do any background checks either? Executive Order 13770. Ethics Commitments by Executive Branch Appointees. This order is about banning lobbying for presidential appointees who have left the White House. Reading about what lobbying is, I think the whole act is both stupid and dishonest. If a given group's organization is legitimate and has potential, the group should only need to let legislature know it's there and request what it needs. If the legislature denies the group of anything it needs, the group can simply discuss matters. To try influencing others is dishonest. As a musician, I know every musician is influenced by others. This happens through fanaticism. Musicians want to integrate a particular style from other musicians into their creation. That's how it should work though, not the other way around. If one musician tries to influence or persuade another musician to either record or perform in a style that one musician prefers, that's manipulation. Politicians are obviously influenced or inspired by other politicians, but many politicians have bad ideas which are bad for people, even if those people like what the politician does. Most people don't know any better, or they're mentally ill. I've heard people say some people would sacrifice their rights just so a politician will hurt minorities, which is sick. I didn't know better myself until a few years ago. Politicians are in the arena of authority and power. They are responsible for the welfare of citizens. Their personal preferences or opinions are irrelevant. Sure, lobbying is protected by the Constitution's First Amendment. However, that doesn't make it right. This makes lobbying politicians dishonest and manipulative. If government resources are scarce, that's a problem which needs to be dealt with. That's not an excuse to lobby. ProPublica.org says these lobbyists agreed to obey Donald's executive order, but then proceeded to do so in sneaky ways. Lobbying is obviously wrong and they know it, if they're finding sneaky ways to go over the president's head to continue lobbying. This executive order is long and consists of many regulations. If this is necessary to keep politicians in line while they still manage to find loopholes, this executive order is a waste of time and energy because those politicians are corrupt and need to be removed. The Supreme Court may have declared the act of lobbying to be lawful under the First Amendment, but those politicians are still guilty of bad intentions. Aside from lobbyists for their own country's government, why is anybody lobbying for a foreign government? Iran has called Donald out for insulting Islam, with the executive order of suspending refugee programs going into effect, while Iran isn't doing anything about Islamic terrorism, ISIS in particular. Javad Zarif threatened America with some kind of retaliation, while Donald is trying to fight terrorism, and doesn't even explain how this 90-day ban is an insult to the Muslim world. While I don't agree with the refugee suspension, because it complicates life for all Muslims, Javad is unprofessional and immature for both claiming Donald has insulted the Muslim world and making such a threat. Amidst the political madness, Anne Donnelly provides some relief for temporaries with a valid visa. Reading the New York Times article about Donald signing a memorandum to develop a plan to defeat ISIS, the small part which Donald has revealed is to start referring to them as ISIS, instead of ISIL, as called by Barack Obama, obviously because Barack called them ISIL, because Donald has a vendetta against him. The first half of this article only talks about Donald calling them ISIS instead, and what ISIL actually means, along with his memorandum that appoints the Pentagon to come up with a plan. Donald had a secret plan, but he needed the Pentagon to cook something up in 30 days? Calling them ISIS instead of ISIL, and signing the memorandum to delegate the responsibility to the Pentagon is the small revelation of Donald's plan. So how can Donald have anything more of a plan if he told the Pentagon to come up with a plan? The other half of this New York Times article contains talk about a conspiracy theory about Barack's coining of ISIL, as somehow to be an attack on them. More of Donald's ISIL versus ISIS bullshit, along with a Rush Limbaugh name drop. Vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices in Tripoli, and finally, NATO. Donald complained about Barack's idea of an attack on these terrorists by calling them ISIL, as if such a tactic has any grounding in reality. But aside from that, Donald did initiate the attack with this memorandum. He was just very shallow about it, with his immature contempt toward Barack. Yes, Barack was also silly, but Donald is no better. If calling them ISIL is an attack, why does Donald need a secret plan, and why is a memorandum required? How are they even a threat if calling them ISIL or ISIS is enough to stop them? How is ISIL even a problem? I've also found a Heritage.org article from 2018 that talks about this plan in action. This article rhetorically asks, was Donald right all along? Was he right about what? How could Donald have a secret plan if he put everything on the Pentagon's table with a 30-day time crunch? The tactical segment of this article mentions that the US was already at war with ISIS before Donald's election. What I'm reading here, things were slow until Donald got into office. The Pentagon needed Donald to speed things up, according to this. Therefore, Donald only kick-started this war. This article mentions local partners. Is the author referring to NATO? The rest of this article is all war talk, which has nothing to do with Donald, so none of it is relevant to this book. I can't understand it, so I couldn't even comment on it anyway. James Mattis talks about war details, tactical changes, which I don't know how many people would understand. Rex Tillerson realized that ISIS has remains within its ruins. Therefore, a U.S. military presence is required to stay over in Syria. ISIS mutating is also acknowledged. So, does this mean Donald will discard the Muslim ban / refugee suspension? I'm not a fan of war, personally, but my philosophy about people who are too big of a problem and nothing can be done about a person or a group is to just eliminate them. Yeah, I don't know about all of this. Some more political confusion arises with Steve Bannon, unless I'm the only one, because this is the first time I'm hearing of Breitbart. I don't even know what it is, exactly. Wikipedia mentions Steve had to admit Breitbart was sexist and racist, but Wikipedia later also mentions Jews came to his defense against allegations from certain groups. How is anybody supposed to know what's going on? Mentions of organizations, Harry Reid, and Republican strategists all criticized Breitbart of anti-Semitic comments, and the list of Jewish names who came to Steve's defense is listed here. The problem is, there are no examples of these claimed comments. I've done a search on both Google and YouTube for both their claims, along with examples of Breitbart's anti-Semitic comments. Nothing. So I can't do anything with any of this. Breitbart was never even covered by any of the podcasts I listen to regularly, nor any videos from channels I've been subscribed to for years. I've done a YouTube search for videos of Steve himself to hear what he says. Still nothing. I only saw a few videos about his ex-wife accusing Steve of not wanting his daughters in a school with many Jewish students. I don't understand why people have just jumped on Steve. That puzzles me at this point. David Sicilian mentions Steve has ties to the white nationalist movement, only for Donald to ignore his letter because Donald has known Bannon for a long time. Donald insists Steve is not racist. So, who is right, and why does such confusion occur in politics, which the media doesn't help with? Whether Steve is guilty of such bigoted mentalities or not isn't even the main issue here, due to this confusion. All facts should be straightforward and made available for the country to know. I've clicked on a few videos about Steve's ex-wife claiming that he didn't want his children attending that school. The problem is, there were no clips of Steve himself saying it, so nothing but hearsay. The fourth paragraph on Wikipedia lists every worldwide national populist conservative political movement which Steve has been involved in. I've clicked on a few of them, but then I moved on in the Wikipedia article. I read the entire paragraph later and saw that Steve is a nationalist, which would be why Donald appointed him. As for populism, I have to say that I agree that this world's economy essentially consists of the wealthy elitists and blue collars pitted against each other, which is a world that those wealthy elitists have set up. I'm simply not interested in being involved in a movement of any sort. The desire for wealth is simply a neurosis, mainly because wealth is a false economic goal. People who want wealth are greedy, and greedy people don't care whom they hurt or screw over to get that money. Steve only has 7 years of military experience that would relate to his National Security Council position of Chief Political Strategist. The rest is media, along with investment banking and Goldman Sachs. So I don't understand why Steve was appointed for this position in security. Alicia told me Donald appointed him because he's a friend. This is politics, not some bullshit job. To hire or appoint somebody because of friendship instead of credentials or qualifications is much more irresponsible. Nobody should be hiring people for a regular job because they're a friend either, but I say that just to point the contrast of importance out. Did Donald even give any of Steve's accusers a chance to speak? Does anybody in America know how well Donald knows Steve? Maybe there are things about Steve that Donald is unaware of, that the accusers do know of, and need to bring to light.